Hello and welcome to The Big Fight. I'm Nidhi Razdan. It's been a colossal exercise in attempting to weed out illegal immigrants from Assam, an exercise that was always riddled in controversy and chaos. The National Register of Citizens, or the NRC, aimed at identifying illegal immigrants, was published last Saturday after 5 years of being monitored by the Supreme Court. And with its publication, it became even clearer that the whole exercise has been a colossal mess. Nearly 2 million people have been excluded in the final list, facing the possibility of being rendered stateless. Heart-wrenching stories have emerged of how families have been torn apart, parents who found themselves on the list, their children missing from the same list, poor people who don't have documents to prove their citizenship, whose belongings have been washed away in flood-hit areas, have struggled to be heard to prove that they are in fact Indians. And politically, a huge irony. The BJP, which has championed the NRC and even called for it to be replicated across India, is today shocked that the final list has a large number of Bengali Hindus in it. They are convinced that the numbers from the high population Muslim areas near the border are not accurate. Amit Shah had campaigned extensively on the issue of illegal immigrants, or termites as he had called them in the last election, but the results of the NRC are not quite what the party had expected. Now, one of its high-profile ministers, Himanta Sarma, has said the last word has still not been said. In the end, though, has the NRC been a humanitarian disaster? Is this something that should even be considered for replication across the country? Let's begin with our panelists on The Big Fight, and I begin first with Wajahat Habibullah, former chairperson of the National Minorities Commission, India's first Chief Information Commissioner. We'll begin with our opening comments first. Mr. Habibullah, we have 1 minute opening comments. Your thoughts, is this a humanitarian disaster?
Well, this is, and as chair of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, we issued a statement in this matter. We consider it a matter that is, the way that it's progressed, a matter that is a threat to the upholding of human rights in our country by ourselves. And I think that is something that we must take very seriously.
Do you think it's something that's worthy of, being replicated in the rest of the country? We couldn't
Certainly
do it in
not.
Assam. How do we do it in the rest of India?
As you mentioned, it is not worthy of replication. We will of course discuss the merits and other things as we go on, but certainly it is not worthy of replication. I know that my colleague, young Mr. Hajela, has worked for years as the coordinator of this, and he's a very hard-working and an extremely upright officer. And he's now, of course, being accused of all kinds of things. But the fact is that despite all that, if this is the consequence, surely it is not something that we can think of replicating in other parts of the country. Well,
you have Subimal Bhattacharjee standing next to you, who is a columnist and who also works with the grassroots cultural organization in Assam. And Mr. Bhattacharjee, your 1 minute opening comments start now. What do you think of how this exercise has been conducted?
Sure. I think the NRC was a process that everyone welcomed at the beginning. Even Mr. Tarun Gogoi still claims that it was his call. And everyone, right from the time of the Assam Accord, felt that the numbers of illegal migrants that have been in Assam, you needed to come to a understanding about what was the actual figure, because everyone was trying to prompt different figures at different points of time. But the whole process that has been carried out with a mix of software and Assam government employees later has now shown that all kinds of names are missing, or the whole lot of exclusion and inclusion has quite become messy. And on top of all of that, you'd be surprised that people's names of men like Kamal Majumdar's name in the final list is now standing as Lotus Majumdar. So obviously Mr. Hajela running this whole show and under the
Kamal
monitoring
actually
of the
literally
Supreme
got
Court.
translated into
Absolutely.
Lotus.
So if the Supreme Court is monitoring and an officer, as Mr. Habibullah mentioned, of his credentials, is handling it, somewhere the responsibility has to lie.
Okay, well, Sangeeta Barua Pishroti from the Wire, the deputy editor at the Wire, is with us. And Sangeeta, in what you have seen and what you have been able to report, how big is this crisis, the humanitarian crisis that we're staring at the moment?
See, I've been reporting on this for the last few years, and every time I go, I come back with these new stories of people suffering, and that has happened across the communities. And I just came back 3 days ago, and the same things have continued. But what I am more worried about is like people who have been left out of it, and many of them claim to be genuine citizens with papers. So they will have to go through the foreigners tribunals now, and their tribunals are not known to be a great, there's already a controversy around it. So now the issue is the new recruits that have been done, for the tribunals. Now number of the tribunals have gone up to 222. So there are about 35-year-old advocates with very little experience of judicial experience are going to actually decide somebody's citizenship, and this has never happened anywhere in the country. So these are things that people on the ground, apart from we talking in the studios, people on the ground are very, very worried.
Okay. In fact, a number of the points you mentioned are something that are issues we need to go into in some more detail. You have Mr. Rajesh Sharma of the BJP standing next to you. Rajesh ji, this didn't quite turn out the way that the BJP wanted, but kya aapko lagta hai, you think that this has been an exercise that has been worth it?
Definitely, the illegal immigrants who are residing in India were taking the jobs of Indians. They were using the facilities which were provided for the Indians, the education, the health facilities and all other things. And after all, the security concerns were there. So definitely it was a worth exercise, and it need to be done. And it was well done under the supervision of the Supreme Court. And as some of our friends have told, that there are few cases where there can be some inclusion, there can be some exclusion. Definitely those need to be taken at the tribunal. We cannot ignore that. Any person who is a genuine Indian should not be ignored, should not be left out. That is the first and foremost concern, and we will definitely go for it. The state government is also of that same view. And in Supreme Court also we have told for 20%, but that was let down. Again we will be contesting in the Supreme Court that 20% for border district and 10% for other district. Definitely we should have this scrutiny type of thing, supervision type. So re-verification should be done.
But despite this going the way it is, you still believe the exercise was good?
Yeah, definitely, because who says that these immigrants who are not legal in India should stay in India? They should not stay in India.
And you're willing to accept
none
that
of the parties, none of the parties are coming
willing
clear.
to accept that even if most of them are Hindus?
Who?
If most of them are
I'm not telling about Hindus, the ones who are legal migrants who are Hindus.
I'm asking you very simply.
It is
Very
only
simple
you.
question.
It is you as well as few political parties who wants to make this difference between Indians and non-Indians, at Hindus and non-Hindus.
No.
It should not
I'm
be done.
asking you a very simple thing. Since your party is demanding a re-verification in those areas where Muslims are in a majority, okay? Because the BJP thought that more Muslims would be excluded from the NRC, the final. That didn't happen, right? So if the NRC, suppose the Supreme Court again says we will not do any re-verification, will you all accept this list, the exclusions the way that they are, which have a huge number of Bengali Hindus?
I can say very categorically we are demanding on the bordering district like Kishanganj.
But suppose Supreme Court says no.
In Karimganj and all the bordering district we are asking 20%, in others we are asking for re-verification of 10%.
I'm asking you something else.
It is not of Hindu and Muslim. You should not paint it that way. Some political parties who are painting it, they should not see it into vote bank politics. It is a thing of national interest and seen as a thing of national interest.
So you are accepting that if the Supreme Court also declines an offer to declines your plea to re-verify the border areas, even if the majority of those who are declared illegal are Hindus, the BJP is okay with that. Karuna Nandi, you're here. How much of the blame in the way this exercise has been conducted actually falls at the Supreme Court's doorstep?
I think it's significant, unfortunately. And I hesitate to say this because it's not something that one would usually say, but there are two things that have happened here. The first is that there is a cocktail of incompetence, a lack of understanding of our residents and citizens, and the difference between the two, and a lack of empathy, I think, in general, right, from the government. And why do I say this? Because if you ask anyone, whether they are from Silchar or whether they are from Bulandshahr, to produce documents either showing that they were here from 1971, March 24th, 1971, or that not one, but both of their parents belong to this country, then much of this country would not be able to prove its citizenship. Let's be clear about that. The second is that the government has failed to recognize that they themselves support our NRIs abroad who say that, look, we've been here for 5 years or 6 years, give us a green card. There are people who have been here for 40 years, possibly. 40 years. And that's not enough.
Okay, so Karna,
No, but I also want
opening
to-
your time for the opening comments is up, because we have a timer on the first comments. I want to open this up because what you talked about, a lack of empathy, and I'll get Sangeeta to talk about that first. Is that the prime takeaway from all of this? That the complete lack of empathy about what people are having to go through to prove their Indianness at the end of the day? And forget that. Now we're looking at the possibility of these people having to appear before these tribunals.
No, Nidhi, it's
to
also
plead
very
guilty.
much legality, and since
Yeah,
I wasn't
yeah.
given the same amount of time as the others, I'll come to it later.
No, everyone has
I
had
think
the same.
empathy is very no.
So,
I just
Karuna,
noted
sorry,
what they were saying.
there's been the
So
same.
empathy is a
There's a
limited
timer. There's a timer.
aspect,
So
right?
if I could be allowed to conduct the debate, Sangeeta, I'll come back to you.
See, before coming to that, I just quickly want to clear a fact that BJP is talking about, even Himanta, everybody is talking about 20% of the re-verification in the border district, which are 4 districts. But more than 20%, 25 to about 40% has already been done by the NRC coordinator. He has put it, this is in public domain, he has said it in the Supreme Court. So if at all something happens, there will be maybe demand for 100%. So that is something else. And talking about empathy, yes, I agree, because people from all communities are caught in this. But what we hear now is only numbers. People are talking about 40 lakh, 30 lakh, 50 lakh, 80 lakh, but these are people also, and many of them are poor people. So this is where we need to also have a look. I have always been saying that then it's the government needs to have some kind of a humane touch to this whole thing, which is lacking.
So Karuna, on the legal point that you were making, that there is a legal issue here, of
So
course.
there are a number of legal issues here. Rajesh ji has been talking about the fact that it's got nothing to do with Hindus or Muslims. This is entirely incorrect. The reason is that the government and the RSS has made a explicit call for this, is pushing through the Citizenship Amendment Bill, which is currently not going to be stopped in the Rajya Sabha if you look at the history of the previous bills. What the Citizenship Amendment Bill does, Mr. Sharma, if you could clarify, although it's laid before Parliament already, is this. It says that if you are an illegal migrant or an undocumented migrant who cannot show the papers, the very, very stringent papers that only the most literate people have, the people who have not been displaced by the Brahmaputra floods, people who are not the typical citizen of Assam, will be able to demonstrate. So now what does the Citizenship Amendment Bill say? It says that if you are from the neighboring countries, and if you are Christian, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, anybody but a Muslim, then your citizenship will be regularized, right? Then you can be part of this country. Who does that leave? That leaves Muslims. We had the reason that I said that I'm extremely disappointed actually in the Supreme Court is that there are 2 things. One is that some of the constitutional challenges to the current citizenship law are pending before a constitutional bench, right?
Yeah.
Triple talaq was given a priority. That's something that's 1400 years old. However, this is something that has been adjourned. The whole process could be scrapped. However, this is something that is not been given priority, and this is going to be heard much later. Who is suffering? If I may just very quickly finish, who is suffering in the meantime? Children who have demonstrated that one parent has documents, but if both parents do not have documents, then they are to be treated as
Can't be included.
Can't be included. So,
Yeah, exactly.
detention centers, you don't have any place to send them. Bangladesh, there's no treaty with Bangladesh.
Rajeshji, you still
are they
think
going to stay in
this is
detention
okay
centers?
on a humanitarian level? I mean, these are not just 1 or 2 stories here and there.
As told by a friend about the humanitarian ground, let us be human towards the Indian. If we are
nobody
letting
disagrees to it. Nobody disagrees.
illegal
Nobody
immigrants here
disagrees
in this
to
country,
that.
and if you are not letting them out of this country, the resources which were meant for them, the taxpayers' money which
Rajesh,
used
so
to
how
be
do you
used for
Indian- but
how do you
Indians,
explain
if they
Indian
were for
children?
used,
How do you explain when parents are on the
told it
list
very
and children are
categorically,
not?
for Indians, no wrongful inclusion, no wrongful exclusion. We are very much strong on that.
Everybody
to
is on the
whatever
same
extent we
page on
need to
this.
go, we will go for it, and we will ensure that every Indian gets its rights. But for illegal immigrants, there is no. The humanity comes for our Indians, then it goes for anyone
That's lovely.
else.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, apple pie and motherhood are good things. I am asking you about specifics, the specific examples both the ladies next to you have raised about how families have been split up, and these are not 1 or 2 cases, sir. They are running into the thousands and the hundreds of thousands, where you have parents who are on the list and children who are not. One parent is on the list, the other is not.
The husband who is there, the wife is not.
Exactly. So how do you deal with that? I'm asking you about the process. You are talking about an end goal, lovely, wonderful. Please tell us how this process has been humane to people.
For that, definitely the court and tribunal will take a call on that because
Yeah,
persons are going to appeal there.
Mr. Hazela, it is Mr. Hazela and his office who has been running a process, getting it cleared through Supreme Court at every stage, and all coming in sealed envelopes, not shared with the state government. So he has defined a process, a mix of software and processes based on human intervention. But
clearly that software doesn't work when Kamal becomes Lotus.
I know of a case in Dibrugarh where out of the same legacy, 6 brothers are there, 5 made it into the list, 1 didn't make it to the list. Now, how does this happen? So, somewhere the responsibility has to happen. That is where, everyone, you are asking Mr. Rajesh, but if you see what was Himanta's point, Himanta said that we'll again go back to the Supreme Court. Both the state and the central government went to the Supreme Court 2 months back, asking for this 20% on the border and 10% in the other areas. But if you look at even to the Supreme Court in April 2018, they had also wanted a sample re-verification of 10%. So later they went back from that, relied on what the Mr. Hazela said that 27% has been done in the process of claims and objection. No one within the system, people who are even applying in the claims and neither the ASU nor APW, anyone knew that that process was happening. So one fine day this has been told, and all through media reports have been pointing out individual instances of all humanitarian issues.
Let's talk about the immediate challenge at hand, which is these tribunals, Wajahat Habibullah. And one of the big concerns, I mean, Sangeeta pointed that out as well, and Karuna can talk about that also, is that who's going to head these tribunals? I mean, we know that there is actually a lack of talent in terms of people with real experience that are now going to have to listen to the appeals of all of these people who face the prospect of being stateless. Free legal aid has been promised. Is that even going to be practical? Is that going to be possible? Do we have that kind of strength of that infrastructure on the ground to let that happen?
Nidhi, when you are undertaking such an ambitious project like the National Register for Citizens, and I will agree that when the National Register for Citizens was initiated to start with, it was generally welcomed, and for the reasons which have been mentioned. The fact is that when government, and having been in government myself, I can say that, when government takes such an important decision, it has to be thought out. It has to be thought out in advance. That no, this is going to result, and it was leading to earlier, it was 4 million people who were coming out of the register. Now it's been reduced, fortunately, to 19 lakh. But, and in anticipation that this will be the case, a fallback arrangement is supposed to be made. That is simple administration. It's a simple bureaucratic structure. The point is that you're raising the questions now. Are these people available? These things should have been thought out well in advance. Now, no use now saying that now there's going to be so many objections, now raising it from 100 to 300. It should have been kept at 300 from the beginning. It should have been anticipated that this is likely to happen.
No, but can I ask, just to be the devil's advocate
here,
that is part of the problem the fact that the Supreme Court was breathing down everybody's neck and saying that you have to do this, we are not going to give an extension. At the end of the day, Mr. Habibullah, the Supreme Court was monitoring it.
But I'm afraid the Supreme Court, as mentioned earlier, the Supreme Court's decisions are also flawed. I'm sorry to make so bold as to say that. But the question is that the Supreme Court has held that only documentary evidence is going to be admitted, and therefore oral evidence is not. Evidence is evidence. Under the law, under the Indian Evidence Act, both documentary and oral evidence are evidence. And this has been pointed out by eminent members of the judiciary also. Now, as you say, the people may not have records, people may have lost documents and floods. How are they to produce it? So all these things have not been thought out. My basic point is this: it has not been thought out. And when you talk of replication, these matters have to be thought out before you think of replication.
Another thing I want to answer just to this point on having been better prepared for this.
I can say first thing. Let me tell about the tribunal. The time NRC was coming up, everyone said that we don't have that much of infrastructure, we cannot do it, and it is not easy. But now it is done. Second thing,
It's not been done properly.
in the month of July
What
2018.
what is done? It's not been done properly.
No, it is done to a lot of
Done
extent,
kya?
and finally there are some things which will be definitely sorted out in the tribunal.
Some
There is, as you told
talking
about the
about
tribunal,
people's
tribunal
lives.
also we have man-force as well as we'll be giving aid at the same time. Second thing, in the month of July 2018, let me be very clear, everyone was saying that out of this 40 lakh persons, no one is definitely going to be cleared. Whatever papers they give, they will not be cleared, and now it has come down to 19 lakhs. So definitely the government is open, the Supreme Court is also listening, and the person who are coordinating are also trying to do it in the best possible way. So there is nothing such making hue and cry. If some mistakes or something is there, we have told it very categorically, no inclusion or exclusion which is wrongful will be there, and we will fight for it till the end. We will not let it
Karuna,
down.
what is your biggest worry about the tribunals, and how you know this process of appeal that people have to go through now? These nearly 2 million people.
I think that there's no interim stay on a number of very important questions that are pending before the Supreme Court. And the entire process in many cases could be completely undone as unconstitutional. There are 5 judges that there's a constitution bench that is going to hear this. And so if it is all undone, you know, what are you going to do? The problem with a lot of these cases, whether it's Aadhaar, whether it's a number of other cases, is that the government rushes ahead, very often in violation of Supreme Court orders, sometimes because the court just doesn't hear it in time. And a fait accompli is presented to citizens of this country, and there is therefore very little room to declare such things unconstitutional. The second thing is that my greatest concern at this point is for the children. What are you going to do with these children? What are you going to do with the other people? There's Harsh Mandar's petition in the Supreme Court is currently pending, and I don't see any great concern about how great these detention centers are. I also want to point out that these laws have not just glimmers but major resonance with the Nuremberg laws, what are otherwise known as the Reich laws, where what happened is that they essentially traced the family trees of people. And the same kind of confusion happened. If you had, for example, 1 or 2 Jewish parents and you were thought to be sufficiently German, if you had 4 or 5 Jewish parents and you were not German enough, people were divided into Germans and non-Germans. Again, I want to reiterate
That's a
that the
controversial
NRC,
comparison that you're making.
it may be controversial, and I'm going into the nitty-gritties. So it is a nitty-gritty comparison, and this is something that we must look at extremely carefully, because what we are looking at is, if you club the Citizenship Amendment Bill together, and let us be clear that that is going to go through, and if you club the NRC process together, the NRC process alone does not discriminate between Hindus and Muslims, which is why the government is so surprised that so many Bengali Hindus were included. But when you club the two together, you see that the people who are excluded are Muslims. And this is something, you know, obviously this is not...
I just want to take off because Sangeeta said something. You're saying the government always knew that this is what it would
in
turn
July
out to be?
2019, when the final draft came, you know, if you look at the state's politics, the politicians, you know, among the BJP, the Hindu leaders, you know, BJP Hindu Bengali Hindu leaders, they were pointing that out, that actually there were more Bengali Hindus who were out than Muslims. But that was said to be this personal comment, because the general elections were coming, so you have to cannibalize on this NRC thing. And you did that. And now when you come back, you just couldn't give any kind of support to your voter base. So this is basically that kind of politics is being played over people's life. Yesterday in Delhi, in Jantar Mantar, a huge lot of protesters came from Assam, from Bengali Hindu community, who were basically BJP voters, and they were also angry and saying the same thing. Now they are demanding another kind of a net before they go to the foreigners tribunal. So this was all known to the party. It is not that, you know, it's something come as a kind of a out of the blue.
But Subhimal, you wanted to comment on an earlier point, but just I wanted to understand the political perspective from you about how the publication of this list and what seemed, Sangeeta says it wouldn't have surprised local politicians, but what seemed to have taken, certainly the central leadership of the BJP was taken aback. Mr. Amit Shah has not spoken on the NRC after the list was published. So what are the implications of this politically? The Assam Students' Union is upset. This is not what their
Everybody
agitation...
is upset.
Yeah, I mean,
everybody is not happy.
No, there are some people who will be upset
to
always. They'll never want a solution.
So who's
and
happy
that's
with this?
industry also that runs in Assam. I will not go to
Who's
that.
happy with it?
No one is happy at this point. As I said, the process have to be looked at. You cannot exclude any genuine Indian, you cannot include any foreigner. So, if a process that has been monitored by Supreme Court, now as Sangeeta is saying that in July the BJP leaders knew, that means leakouts came from Mr. Pratik Hajala's infrastructure. So, that means the thing was flawed. There were gaps that needed to be countered. Now, who needed to look at that? Of course, Supreme Court, he was the man who was reporting. But what I wanted to tell you was that as far as the tribunals are concerned, in 34 years, 100 tribunals only disposed of 2 lakh cases out of the 6 lakh. So, 4 lakh are already remaining. Now, out of 19, 3.6 are someone who didn't apply. So, you already have another 19 lakhs that you have to dispose in 120 days, and 300 additional are functioning from 1st October. That means it comes to almost 16,000 disposals per day. So, the infrastructure, whatever the state government might want to put, even if you put 1,000, 2,000 will possibly not be adequate. Hence, as Mr. Rajesh rightly pointed out, going back to the Supreme Court and again finding a way to make it possible to have a look at how do you correct it is very important. I think both the state and the central governments at the beginning have made twice the appeals in the Supreme Court. And as far as Amit Shah's point is concerned, he is going to Guwahati tomorrow. There are 2 days of NEDA meeting as well as the NEC meeting. So, I am sure threadbare that would have come up. Yesterday also there was a Northeast DGP's meeting in Nagaland. So, all these things are being looked at. But I think the time has come for everyone to relook at it, because we have to solve the problem in Assam. You cannot allow all the time emotions and identity to take over economics. The state is not going forward. All of us we never grew up in a atmosphere of trying to decipher, who is a Bengali, who is this thing. I come from the hills being a Bengali.
But yeah, absolutely. But the point is, Wajahat Habibullah, as Karuna said earlier, that if you have the Citizenship Amendment Bill being brought in the next session of Parliament, that has the potential to unleash a whole other set of chaos. As you try to sort of legalize everyone basically except Muslims as citizens of India.
The problem was aggravated because of the bill, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
That is, of course, the case, and that is another issue altogether, an issue for
linked
criticism.
to this.
But the National Capital the Citizens Register in itself is flawed. That is what we are discussing now. Then, taken with the Citizenship Bill, it is, in my view, altogether illegal. But of course, that is a matter for the legal community to decide. But the point taking on from what Mr. Bhattacharya just said, he's mentioned the case of the tribunals, how it is virtually impossible for even the 300 additional tribunals, which means 400 tribunals, to dispose of these cases in 120 days. But then, that doesn't bring a close, because then other appeals are still open. So, these cases are going to go on and on forever, and right to the top in a judicial system which is already overloaded, heavily overloaded.
Another thing I want to add
one view I am very clear that out of this 19 lakh, definitely 10 to 12 lakhs might be knowing that we are illegal and they are not going to appeal and they don't have the papers
How
also
do you
to go.
already those who felt that they didn't have papers and not applied?
Some might be having some, there can
3
be
to 4 lakh
chances
people
that they will
haven't
be
applied
managing or
already.
something
But
other.
there's a big
managed
difference
paper or
between
some
3
other
lakhs
thing.
and 10 lakhs.
Yeah, they haven't
I'm
applied.
not
but
as
these
per
people
me,
have applied because they think that they have documents to prove it.
Yeah.
No, I don't think about out of this 19 lakh,
many have died also, many have gone
all
to
will
the
come
state
for
court.
tribunal. It is
the
100%
question-
sure that they will not be
And what
coming.
about the children? That
That's
Karuna, the point that
The ones who
Karuna-
are not legal residents of this country, who are illegal immigrants, we told very categorically they don't have right to stay in the country.
But
where are you going to put them?
May I
So,
come in?
and
May I
for
come
those
in
things,
on this point?
for those things we told that tribunal and court will take a call on that.
There is a court order on that, saying that that is not sufficient. So, did you go against that court order?
Again,
Did
court
you
can
say that
take a
that court
call.
order should
Again,
not be there?
court can take
Mr.
a call,
Habibullah
or
has a
the
point.
government can
May I
decide
come in on
that
this?
or
May I
not.
come in on this
Yeah, yeah.
exact point? Even during this whole process, this legal process, going all the way to the Supreme Court, the case is going to last. The cases will last for years.
For years.
Where are these people going to go? Bangladesh is not going to say, yes, please come back.
Yes.
Now we've
What-
said it's an internal issue,
It's
so
an
now we're
internal
not even
issue.
bringing
We ourselves are
Bangladesh
saying
into
it's an
it.
internal issue. So we will have to have some place where they're going to stay. Now you already have mentioned about the detention centers. Are there those detention centers, all the Palace of Versailles? I mean, people even those who are living there, are they leading a very productive existence? What will we create for ourselves? We will create a bane in our own society. by keeping a large number of people under detention, without facilities, without modern facilities. How can we do that? We are India. We are a pinnacle civilizational world. You can't do that. It's also against the United Nations resolutions of which we are signatory on civil and political rights.
Add something to this
Basically,
debate.
we cannot say that still last many years we have allowed illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, and future also we will be keeping and allowing them, and because we are India, we cannot do that. We cannot do that. We are very categorical and we are very clear on that front that it will not be allowed that illegal immigrants from Bangladesh will penetrate as they have
Actually, we
penetrated
kept
in
in
last many
detention
years,
centers.
and we will not allow that. And the ones who are here, who are illegal, need to be very much clear, and we are.
अच्छा, but आप भेजेंगे कहाँ उनको? Have you thought about that?
देखिए
बताएंगे?
भेजेंगे कहाँ वो अलग चीज है, पर आज के दिन
नहीं, अलग
उसको-
चीज नहीं है.
नहीं।
It is not अलग चीज. It is the cheese. So please tell us. Where are you
Definitely
going to send
उसके
them?
There's
उसके
lot
ऊपर
of
में
fear on
decision
the
लेगा,
ground
क्योंकि
because
वो
of that.
नहीं, आप बताइए,
नॉर्मल
कुछ तो
देखिए
सोचा
ये
होगा
बड़ा
ना।
क्लियर है कि उनको भेजना तो पड़ेगा ही। अब वो
कहाँ?
आज के दिन बांग्लादेश विल हैव टू टेक, अगर वो
Why
बांग्लादेश
will
के लोग हैं।
Bangladesh take?
अगर
We
बांग्लादेश
have
के
said
लोग
it
हैं
is
तो
an
बांग्लादेश
Indian
will
matter.
take them.
Bangladesh has said we will not take. फिर
The
कहाँ?
government has already announced
So,
that that's not
so,
going
so
to happen.
that is a later on thing, but now
is
we
it
need
later
to
on?
clear that there should
No,
be a
one second.
register.
It is not later on, it is
For
now.
for
What
for
are you
long
going to
years
do
you have
with
allowed.
people you
What
declare
do you
illegal?
feel that in future also we should allow all these Bangladeshis
No,
to
no, no.
future
I am
also
asking
they
you
should
what
come.
is the plan?
They should come.
There should not be illegal immigration. Absolutely. Now
Yeah.
you tell me what will you do with these people?
Till you make such kind
You
of
don't know.
register,
Say
who
you don't
told
know.
that they will not be coming? They will be coming. Because we had that courage under the Supreme Court
That's
order
wonderful.
to do this.
But I am asking, what
Yeah.
will you do with them?
The once definitely decision will be taken on that, but one thing very
In other words, you
categorically,
don't know.
we will not allow
No,
any
no. You
new
don't know
person
what.
also
There
to
is
come.
no plan. There is
By-
no plan.
by
Scheme
saying,
के साथ क्या
no
करना
one
है?
can stop it.
But Karuna, I want to ask you about the legal implications of when you bring, if they do bring, and they might bring the Citizenship Amendment Bill to give Hindu immigrants at least that legalize them, as it were. When that is happening with the NRC also taking place, what are the legal implications of that? Are the two not completely contradictory?
The legal implications are that the Hindu vote bank that is in jeopardy, because there's a large number of Bengali Hindus that have been included, would be possibly then legalized. Who does that leave? That leaves the Muslims. The point is that, Rajesh Sharma, I would like you to go home and talk to the staff in your house. The lady who sweeps the floors, if you have a village somewhere, आप कहाँ के रहने वाले हैं?
आपसे
Mr.
कुछ
Sharma?
पूछ रही हूँ।
Yeah.
आप कहाँ के रहने वाले हैं?
दिल्ली
दिल्ली के? अच्छा। नहीं, कहीं लिंक्स होंगे,
लिंक्स होंगे।
you know, गाँव में लिंक्स होंगे। आप वहाँ पे जाइए, वहाँ पे लोगों से बात कीजिए और उनसे पूछिए कि आपके पास पेपर है, हिंदुओं से, मुस्लिमों से, जिसकी पीढ़ियाँ इस देश की पली बड़ी हैं, उनसे आप जाके बात कीजिए और उनसे पूछिए कि आपके पास पेपर हैं। हमारे देश में you see that we have a very, very small proportion of people who are literate. It's not the, you know, whatever, the over 60%, over 70% that is claimed, because that is measured by whether you can write your name or not. Documentation is extremely thin on the ground. And therefore, if you don't have the documentation, if you don't have the papers, a lot of these papers a lot of the people who have passed the NRC test will have manufactured papers. I will give you a guarantee on this. And so therefore, we have a situation where a number of productive citizens have been rounded up and been put in a detention camp with nowhere to go. This is why I say, and if you also look at the nitty-gritties of the sections and the nitty-gritties of the right laws, and this I am saying to you because I trust also that there are many people in government who have empathy and who have more than that, who are able to see legality, right? Because this is a precursor to the Holocaust, and I do not overstate it.
All in the government.
Precursor to the Holocaust. That's
Because
very
you are
strong
singling
word.
out the right kind
First
of
thing,
Indians
all in the
and people
government
who-
have empathy.
wrong kind of
No denial for that. Second thing, I told it very categorically, to whatever extent we need to go. If anyone who is Indian and is excluded or any type of wrong inclusion or exclusion, we will be fighting
just
to
compared this
any
to
extent.
Nazi
To any
Germany.
extent, we have
Did you
told.
hear that
so,
part?
So it can be any way out.
Did
We
you
will
hear the part where she compared this to Nazi Germany?
Section by section, sir.
I'm saying very categorically on one thus front that here to any extent we need that all the persons who are Indian, we will go to any extent to
Okay,
save
Sangeeta,
their
okay.
identity.
Certain things I want to make it clear.
Right.
You know, finally, I, having come from the state, I also belong to a generation where because of this problem, we had to, I think Subimal also, we have to leave that state because there was no peace and the state couldn't promise us anything. So now for me also as a member of the community is also looking at peace. You know, will there be peace in this because of NRC? Because we were, most people were waiting for, you know, because it was a social consensus between all communities. But what we have been seeing throughout, be it Congress, BJP or even AGP, it's only playing politics over people's heads and people's sentiments. So this is something, so that's why you don't find any social acceptance to this now. And that on top of it comes Supreme Court, which says in this August 13 judgment, the order, it says that this NRC, which is going to be published on August 31st, is also going to be updated subject to the decision of the 5-member that constitution bench. So if you have not set up that constitution bench, then why did you allow this to happen and so much confusion on the ground? And the government is also not ready with any solution. So the people on the ground are really very worried. I've just come back 3 days. People are only talking about that कि हमारा क्या होगा, इसके बाद क्या होगा.
Can I ask, as we sort of start winding down, Wajat Habibullah, I mean, you chair the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative as well. What this is making India look like to the rest of the world? There is a lot of international attention right now, both on Kashmir as well as on the NRC process in Assam. And in a way, India's democratic credentials are really on test in both these examples. What is the sense you get when you look at the way it's being reported, the way India is being looked at?
Well, I really don't have to clarify that because it is clear to all of us how India is being looked upon. The reports in the foreign media, their reports, their requests by foreign governments, friendly governments, and so on. So I really don't have to elucidate on that point. But the fact is that it has not done our image anything great, because India, and this is not only, and I talked about the great India, and Mr. Rajeshji felt that we shouldn't aspire to be that, but India has always been, for centuries, for millennium, the home for those seeking refuge. And if it has been home for refugees from a certain part or a particular religion, I mean, what happened in 1971? India took in all those refugees, which then forced us into a war. The fact is that, and then that is also one of the precursors of the present argument.
Absolutely.
But the point is that I do not think this does well for the image of India unless we're able to explain. And the debate today before you clearly shows that we're not able to explain why and for what reason we need to do this.
See, another
Yes,
thing I want
the
to
point
quickly
made
add
by
here.
Rajesh ji that if foreigners have illegally entered our country, then we need to do something. Of course, every country does something like this. If people go into the US, for example, which also welcomes H-1B visitors and so on and so forth, but goes without those, then there is a process to be followed. They must be declared foreigners, and they will only work under actual permits. Is it so difficult to do that with people who are resident here? But these are things that have to be thought out. When I mentioned earlier that we have to think out the consequences.
Sangeeta.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the thing is, if you see the positions of, say, organizations like ASU and all, which spearheaded this for anti-foreigner agitation in the 70s, their argument is that we are going to take this people till 1971, but after that it should be distributed among the country, within the country. But even Mr. Modi, and be it during Indira Gandhi's time, even Jail Singh and all are on record to have said that we will do this. So they have, nobody talks about that. It is not just, so that means the solution somewhere had reached to some level it has reached, okay. So but that is not never discussed. Only politics is played. So this is where the whole problem is, And I, as an Assamese, coming from the state, I actually I hate to take the moral responsibility for having started these detention centers. These are all very ad hoc things. This was all left to the state government during Tarun Gogoi's time to respond to it. And then they turned some sides of the certain district jails into detention centers. So, but border control is Government of India's job. So, how do you then leave all these important decisions to a state government to take? So, this is like, you know,
you
the
know,
situation is that.
There are a couple of arguments here, and so it's like one argument is the one that Wajahat Habibullah makes, that India is a country that embraces, you know, those who seek refuge in our borders. But the problem of illegal immigration has been a real one for the people of Assam, and various groups over the years for decades have voiced that genuine angst, which many say was
These are
never.
also smaller communities.
Sure.
The fear is too much.
But do you think then the way forward will be to find what he talked about, it would be to find a sort of halfway, work permits and those sort of things, rather than, you know, having to lock people away in detention centers or you know, send them to nowhere, because there's nowhere to send them to.
Ultimately, a working model has to emerge.
Yes.
But I just want to add to one point that he made. You know, the door is not closed even for a Muslim refugee if he comes into this country. 27 December 2011, there is a Home Ministry clear directive about how even you take a Muslim from those countries. So I didn't want to bring the citizenship bill debate into this because they are not linked at all at this stage. But even in the citizenship bill that is coming, on the 7th September 2015, government through the Home Ministry's Gazette notification already has, you know, taken the case of religious persecution of all these communities from all these 3 countries. So even if they are here, in the context of the Passports Act, they are not illegal, you know, they are already here. What you are doing through the citizenship bill is you are giving them, instead of 12 years, 6 years, and then and that process, it's a very strenuous process. It's not like, you know, anyone coming tomorrow come and take a citizenship. No, 31st December 2014, after that nobody is allowed, and even those came before that, they have a 6-year wait period. So where does our humanitarian this thing go away then?
So the last question, sort of in the last 5 minutes, Rajesh ji, we heard the BJP initially say that this would be an all India exercise. वो आवाजें थोड़ी सी कम हो गई हैं after this list got published. But you had Manoj Tiwari, for instance, say that there should be in Delhi an NRC in Delhi, because Delhi elections are coming. So I guess he felt the need to say that. Can I ask you very honestly, hand on your heart, seeing the way this process has been so chaotic in Assam, do you really think, does the BJP really think this is something that needs to be replicated across India at this time?
Definitely, it should be done in the whole country. And
it should be done.
Across country, we have seen leaders who are speaking that it should be done. The first thing. Second thing, you spoke
because
about.
You don't think there was anything wrong with the process, that it was flawed?
Wrong, definitely, if there is some type of errors and faults are there, then that need to be rectified for in the another
But
process,
it should be there in the full
country.
country.
To be rectified and have to be done. Because in every process, whenever you do, some problem will erupt and you will have to come for some solution for that. Second, you spoke about the Kashmir issue and media reporting that. All the foreign media and whatever media is reporting that is totally biased and...
Everybody is biased.
No, the ones who are reporting on the other front saying all wrong.
Foreign media in Assam tried to play a Muslim versus Hindu game.
Yeah, it's not a Muslim-Hindu issue. It's a humanitarian
that is
issue.
totally creation. That is totally creation. Similarly, all are not reporting now. Only few medias outside and few medias in this country are totally reporting that in Kashmir everyone is inside, no one comes out, nothing is normal.
Kashmir here. Please talk about Assam.
Slowly and you spoke of Kashmir.
I only told him about a larger question of India's democratic credentials. Are you saying, Rajesh ji, that the way the exercise is being conducted in Assam, I mean, how can you just say that it's just 1 or 2 problems here and there? I mean, should you not admit that this has been a deeply flawed process? We need to review how we've done it. Even if we want to do it, structural problems have been there. You can at least say, before we do it in the rest of India, we need to revisit how we do it.
Definitely, anything if you take any steps, some errors can occur and which are not foresighted and which are not foreseen, and definitely those need to be addressed.
Acha.
Yeah.
But we should all look for our birth certificates now, right?
Yeah, we should be positive and things will be done.
Great.
It should be done.
So please go and look for your birth certificate, Karuna.
The problem with all of this is that there is a reversal of the burden of proof.
Yeah.
Something that this government seems to have no compunction of, whether it's the UAPA and you are telling someone to prove that they are not a terrorist, or whether there is the NRC process where you are saying that you demonstrate that you're a citizen rather than us demonstrating that you are not a citizen. You see? Why should people who have been here for 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, when you have not managed to, and you and the previous governments, the Congress government was not so much better than your government on this. When you have not demonstrated, that you can provide the literacy, when you have not demonstrated that you have the ability to provide the documents that you even ask of them, when you have not demonstrated that you have the ability to even sift the documents that do exist. Do not perpetuate this humanitarian crisis that you have begun. There is still time. This is what I would say.
All right, well, clearly we have a very long and difficult process ahead of us for these nearly 2 million people, whether it's with the tribunals, whether it is with the high courts and Supreme Courts. This is a process that is going to take many, many years. It is deeply flawed, clearly, despite what Mr. Rajesh Sharma says. So before expanding it to the rest of India, one hopes that there are lessons learned from this and how it can be done better. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us on The Big Fight today. Thanks.